Ambassador Elena Vance stood in the center of the grand chamber, surrounded by beings that had ruled the stars for millions of years. The room was enormous, built to make visitors feel small. Floating platforms held the representatives of 47 species, each one older and more powerful than humanity. Their eyes, some glowing, some compound, some made of pure energy, all looked down at the small human woman in her simple, black uniform. She had practiced her speech 1,000 times on the journey here. Now the words felt like stones in her throat. "Honored Council," Elena began, her voice steady despite her fear. "The Virathi swarm has entered the Sol system. We have confirmed 17 billion individual organisms approaching our worlds. Our fleet numbers 312 vessels. We cannot survive this alone." Silence filled the chamber. Elena could hear her own heartbeat. The Concord had existed for 10,000 years. Its member species had built empires, conquered death itself, and mapped every corner of the galaxy. Humanity had joined only 50 years ago, after proving they were civilized enough to deserve a seat at the table. They had followed every rule, paid every tax, submitted to every inspection. And now, when they faced extinction, Elena had come to ask for help. High Counselor Vetner, a towering creature of crystal and light, spoke first. His voice echoed through the chamber like wind through a canyon. "The swarm is a force of nature, Ambassador. It has consumed 12 civilizations in its existence. Your people knew the risks when they expanded into that region of space." "We expanded where the Council told us to expand," Elena replied. "We were given those systems. We were told they were safe." Another voice joined the conversation. Delegate Morati, a being that looked like a living shadow, leaned forward on her platform. "The swarm changed course unexpectedly. This is not the Council's fault. It is simply bad fortune." "Bad fortune?" Elena's voice cracked. 8 billion people will die. Children, families, our entire civilization. And you call it bad fortune? The chamber erupted in murmurs. Several delegates turned away, uncomfortable with the human's emotion. Others simply watched with cold curiosity, as if studying an insect struggling in a web. Elena pressed on. "The Concord has 14 million warships spread across your territories. We ask for 10,000. Just 10,000 ships, and we can hold the swarm at the outer planets long enough to evacuate our civilians. Please, we have nowhere else to turn." High Counselor Vetner raised one crystalline hand, and the chamber fell silent again. "The Council will vote on your request, Ambassador Vance. Please wait outside while we deliberate." Elena wanted to scream. She wanted to grab these ancient beings and shake them until they understood. Instead, she bowed her head respectfully and walked out of the chamber. The doors closed behind her with a sound like a tomb sealing shut. She waited for 6 hours. When the doors finally opened, Elena knew the answer before anyone spoke. She could see it in the way the guards refused to meet her eyes. She could feel it in the cold silence that followed her back to the center of the chamber. "Hi." Counselor Vetner's voice was calm, almost gentle. "The Council has voted. 42 species have chosen to abstain. 4 have voted against intervention. 1 has voted in favor." He paused. "Your request for military assistance is denied." Elena stood perfectly still. The words washed over her like ice water. "Furthermore," Vetner continued, "the Council has decided to activate the isolation protocol for the Sol system. All jump gates connecting your territory to Concord space will be shut down within 72 hours. This will prevent the swarm from using your gates to spread to other systems." "You're sealing us in," Elena whispered. "You're trapping us with them. We are protecting the greater galactic community. Humanity is a young species. Your loss, while regrettable, is acceptable when weighed against the potential deaths of trillions." "Acceptable." The word burned in Elena's mind like fire. Delegate Marati spoke again, her shadow form shifting uncomfortably. Ambassador, you must understand. The Concord has survived for 10,000 years because we make difficult decisions. Your people will be remembered. Your sacrifice will not be forgotten. Elena looked around the chamber. 47 species. Millions of years of combined wisdom. And not one of them would lift a finger to save 8 billion innocent lives. Something changed in Elena Vance at that moment. The fear left her eyes, replaced by something harder and colder. When she spoke, her voice no longer shook. I understand perfectly, counselors. You have decided that humanity is expendable. You have chosen to let us die because saving us would be inconvenient. She straightened her spine and lifted her chin. I want you to remember this moment. Remember how you looked down at us from your platforms. Remember how you called our deaths acceptable. Ambassador, please, Vethaner began. No. Elena's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. You will let me finish. The Virathi swarm has destroyed 12 civilizations. 12 species that begged and pleaded and died alone in the dark. You watched them all burn, and you did nothing. Because it was easier. Because they were young and weak and far away. She turned slowly, meeting the eyes of every delegate she could see. Humanity is different. We do not forget. We do not forgive. And if even one of us survives what is coming, you will see us again. That is not a threat, counselors. It is a promise. The chamber was utterly silent. Elena Vance walked out of the Grand Chamber for the last time. Behind her, the oldest civilizations in the galaxy sat in uncomfortable silence, already trying to forget the small human woman and her doomed people. 72 hours later, the jump gates to Sol went dark. The Galactic Concord erased humanity from their maps and moved on to other business. Within a year, most species had forgotten that humans ever existed, but Elena's words echoed through the void, carried by the last transmission she sent before the gates closed. You will remember this day. I promise you that. On Earth, billions of people looked up at the sky and watched the first swarm ships enter their solar system. They did not know that the galaxy had abandoned them. They did not know that they had been declared expendable, but they would learn. And in learning, they would become something the universe had never seen before. Something that would make the ancient powers of the Concord tremble. Something born from betrayal, forged in fire, and driven by a memory that would never fade. The stars had turned their backs on humanity. They would soon regret that choice. The swarm came like a wave of living darkness. 17 billion creatures, each one born to kill and consume, poured into the Sol system with a hunger that had devoured entire civilizations. Their bioships blotted out the sun. Their screams echoed through every radio frequency, and humanity's tiny fleet flew out to meet them. The first battle of Sol lasted 3 hours. When it ended, 187 human ships drifted as burning wreckage. 60,000 sailors floated dead in the void. The swarm had lost perhaps 1 million organisms, a number so small it meant nothing to them. Admiral Chen Wei, commander of the surviving fleet, sent one final message to Earth before retreating to Mars. We cannot win in open battle. We must change how we fight. Fall back. Go underground. Survive. And so began the long dark. Cities emptied as billions of people fled into underground bunkers, cave systems, and sealed habitats. Governments collapsed and reformed. Nations that had argued for centuries suddenly found common cause in survival. The Terran sovereignty was born in those first terrible months, a unified government with one simple purpose: keep humanity alive. The swarm landed on Earth 6 weeks after the first battle. They came down like rain, billions of organisms spreading across every continent. They consumed everything in their path: forests, animals, cities, people. The surface of Earth became a nightmare of chitinous bodies and screaming swarms. But the swarm had never faced an enemy that hid underground. They had never fought a species that built bunkers miles deep and connected them with tunnels. For the first time in their existence, the swarm had to dig for their food. Elena Vance died in the 3rd year of the war. She had refused to stay safe in a bunker, instead leading supply convoys between settlements. A swarm hunting pack caught her convoy in the Rocky Mountains. She fought until her ammunition ran out, then fought with her knife, then fought with her bare hands. They found her body 3 days later, surrounded by dead swarm organisms. She had killed 17 of them before they brought her down. Her last words were recorded by a surviving soldier. "Tell them humanity does not forget." Those words became a prayer. 10 years into the war, humanity had lost 4 billion people. Half the species gone. Entire continents had been abandoned to the swarm. Children grew up in darkness, never seeing the sun, never knowing what blue sky looked like. They learned to fight before they learned to read. But humanity was learning other things too. Scientists working in secret bunkers studied captured swarm organisms. They dissected them, analyzed their biology, mapped their neural networks. They discovered that the swarm was not mindless. Each organism was connected to queens, massive creatures that directed the hive with psychic signals. Kill a queen, and thousands of swarm units became confused and disorganized. The first queen died in year 12. A team of soldiers spent 6 months tracking her location, then detonated a nuclear device directly beneath her nest. The explosion killed 30,000 humans who lived in the region. They had volunteered, knowing they would die, knowing their sacrifice would save millions. Humanity began winning. Engineers found abandoned Concord outposts on the outer moons, stations that the Alien Council had built and forgotten centuries ago. They stripped these stations for technology, reverse engineering weapons and shield systems that were thousands of years more advanced than anything Earth had ever built. Human ships became faster, stronger, deadlier. By year 20, the swarm controlled only 40% of Earth's surface. By year 30, they held only scattered territories in the most remote regions. And by year 40, the last swarm queen in the Sol system died screaming as human soldiers tore her apart with weapons that combined alien technology with pure human rage. The war was over. 8 billion people had become 3 billion. Entire generations had been born, lived, and died in underground bunkers. The surface of Earth was scarred and broken, covered in the remains of swarm nests and human battlefields. But humanity had survived. Admiral Chen Wei, now an old man with scars covering half his face, stood on the surface of Earth for the first time in 40 years. The sky was gray with ash and dust. The ground was black-eyed from swarm acids and nuclear fire. But it was still Earth. It was still home. Beside him stood a young officer named Kazuki Tanaka. He was 12 years old when the swarm first arrived. He had watched his parents die in the first battle. He had grown up in the darkness, training every day, fighting every night, surviving when so many others did not. Now he wore the uniform of the Terran Sovereignty Navy, and his eyes held the same cold fire that Elena Vance's had held in the council chamber. "What do we do now?" Kazuki asked. Chunwei looked up at the sky. Somewhere beyond that gray ceiling, past the asteroid belt and the outer planets, stood the sealed jump gates that connected Sol to the rest of the galaxy. The gates that the Concord had closed. The gates that had trapped humanity with the swarm. "Now we rebuild," Chunwei said. "Now we grow strong. And when we are ready, we open those gates and show the galaxy what they created when they left us to die." Kazuki nodded slowly. He thought of his parents, burned to ash in the void. He thought of the billions who had died screaming. He thought of Elena Vance and her promise. How long will it take? He asked. Chen Wei smiled, and there was no warmth in it. As long as it takes. Humanity does not forget, Lieutenant. And one day, the galaxy will remember us. The reconstruction began that very day. Factories rose from the ashes. Shipyards were built in orbit around Mars and Jupiter. Schools taught children to read, to write, and to never trust anyone who was not human. The Terran sovereignty had been forged in darkness and blood. It had been born from betrayal and abandoned to die. But it had survived. And survival was just the beginning. Above the broken Earth, the first new warship completed its construction. It was named the Elena Vance, and written on its hull in letters 10 meters tall was a single phrase: "We remember." The stars had tried to kill humanity. They had failed. And now humanity would make them pay for that failure. The long dark was over. The age of reckoning was about to begin. 80 years of silence passed in the Sol system. To the rest of the galaxy, humanity was a memory. A cautionary tale told the young species about the dangers of expanding too quickly. The Galactic Concord had long since stopped thinking about the small planet called Earth and the 8 billion people they had condemned to death. They should have been paying attention. Admiral Kazuki. Tanaka stood on the observation deck of the orbital station called Heaven's Gate. Looking down at the planet Mars, the red world had changed beyond recognition. Where there had once been empty deserts, now there were cities. Where there had once been silence, now there was the constant thunder of industry. Mars had become a forge, and the forge never stopped burning. Tanaka was 143 years old. Life extension technology, stolen from Concord databases and improved by human scientists, had kept him alive far beyond natural limits. His body was reinforced with synthetic muscles and organs. His mind was enhanced by neural implants. But his memories were still human, still painful, still sharp. He remembered his parents dying in the first battle. He remembered Elena Vance's funeral, where they buried an empty coffin because the swarm had left nothing to bury. He remembered Admiral Chen Wei's last words before he died of old age 40 years ago. "Finish what we started, Kazuki. Make them remember." Tanaka had dedicated his life to that mission. Below the observation deck, shipyards stretched across the Martian surface for thousands of kilometers. Automated factories worked day and night, producing weapons, armor, and components. Human workers supervised armies of robots, building warships that combined the best of 3 technologies: human engineering, captured swarm biotechnology, and stolen Concord systems. The result was something the galaxy had never seen before. Human warships did not look like the elegant vessels of the Concord. They did not look like the organic horrors of the swarm. They looked like rage given physical form. Angular hulls covered in living armor. Weapon systems that could tear holes in reality itself. Engines that broke every law of physics the Concord thought they understood. And there were so many of them. Tanaka pulled up the fleet registry on his neural display. The numbers scrolled past his eyes like a dream. 100,000 destroyers, 50,000 cruisers, 10,000 battleships, 5,000 carriers. And at the heart of the fleet, 500 dreadnoughts, each one the size of a small moon. Each one capable of destroying an entire planet. 500,000 warships. Built in silence. Built in secret. Built with one purpose: Admiral. A young officer approached, saluting crisply. "The final jump gate prototype is ready for testing." Tanaka nodded slowly. This was the moment he had waited for. The Concord had sealed the gates to Sol 120 years ago, thinking they had trapped humanity forever. They did not know that human scientists had spent decades studying the remains of those gates, learning their secrets, building new ones. "Begin the test," Tanaka ordered. Deep in space, beyond the orbit of Pluto, A massive ring of metal and energy came to life. Lightning crackled across its surface. Space itself seemed to bend and twist. And then, with a flash of light, a portal opened to another star system. Tanaka watched the readings on his display. The gate was stable. The connection was strong. For the first time in over a century, humanity could leave Sol, but Tanaka did not order the fleet to move. "Not yet. Close the gate," he said. "We are not ready." The young officer looked confused. "Sir, we have 500,000 ships. The Concorde has grown weak and lazy. We could strike now and catch them completely unprepared." Tanaka turned to face the young man. His eyes were cold, ancient, filled with memories of fire and blood. "Let me tell you something about revenge, Lieutenant. It is not about destruction. It is about justice. When we return to the galaxy, I do not want to simply hurt the Concorde. I want them to understand exactly why they are being hurt. I want every species that voted against us to see our ships fill their skies and know that they caused this. I want them to remember our faces when they close their eyes at night." He turned back to the window. "We will spend 10 more years preparing. We will build more ships, train more soldiers, perfect our weapons. And we will create a message that will play across every system we enter, showing the galaxy exactly what they did to us. When we return, there will be no confusion. There will be no excuses. There will only be reckoning." The young officer saluted again and left to carry out the orders. Tanaka remained at the window for a long time, watching the factories of Mars glow in the darkness. He thought about Elena Vance and her promise to the Council. He thought about the 5 billion humans who had died in the long dark. He thought about the children who had grown up in bunkers, never seeing sunlight, fighting for survival before they learned to walk. The galaxy had created this. The galaxy had abandoned humanity and expected them to die quietly. Instead, humanity had survived. They had grown strong. They had built an armada that would make the ancient powers tremble. And soon, very soon, the galaxy would meet the species they had betrayed. 10 years later, Fleet Admiral Kazuki Tanaka stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Remembrance. Around him, 500,000 warships waited in perfect formation. Every crew member knew their role. Every weapon was charged and ready. Every heart burned with the same fire that had kept humanity alive through 40 years of darkness. Tanaka opened a channel to the entire fleet. His voice was calm, steady, the voice of a man who had waited over a century for this moment. 120 years ago, the galaxy abandoned us. They sealed our gates and left us to die. They called us expendable. They expected us to disappear. He paused, letting the words sink in. They were wrong. 500,000 ships hummed with power. Today, we open the gates. Today, we return to the stars. Not as victims, not as refugees, but as judgment itself. The Concorde will learn that humanity does not forget. The Concorde will learn that humanity does not forgive. And when they see our ships fill their skies, they will finally understand the price of their betrayal. Tanaka raised his hand. All ships, engage jump gates. It is time the galaxy remembered humanity. The gates activated. Reality tore open, and 500,000 warships poured through into a galaxy that had no idea what was coming. The silence was over. The thunder had arrived. Station Commander Zelveth was enjoying a quiet morning when his entire world changed. The Concorde border outpost he commanded was small and unimportant, watching a region of space that nothing had entered for over a century. It was considered a retirement posting, a place for officers who had grown old and wanted peaceful final years. The alarm shattered that peace like glass. "Commander!" His sensor officer's voice was high with panic. "The dead gate is activating." Zelveth dropped his drink. The Dead Gate. The ancient portal that led to the sealed Sol system. The gate that the Concord had shut down 120 years ago to contain the Varathi swarm. "That is impossible," he said, moving to the command center. "That gate was destroyed. The humans are dead. The swarm consumed them generations ago." But the readings did not lie. Energy signatures were spiking. Space was bending. Something was coming through. "Send an alert to Concord Command," Zelveth ordered. "Tell them we have anomalous activity at the Sol Gate." He never finished the transmission. The gate exploded with light, and ships began pouring through. Not dozens, not hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands. More ships than Zelveth had ever seen in his 300 years of life. They filled the sky like a swarm of angry insects. And for one terrible moment, he thought the Varathi had learned to build STA, or SHIPS. Then he saw the symbols on their hulls. Words in a language that had not been seen in over a century. "Human words, we remember. All gods protect us," Zelveth whispered. The Terran Armada did not slow down. It did not negotiate. It did not even acknowledge the border station's existence. The first wave of destroyers simply fired as they passed, and the station vanished in a ball of nuclear fire. Zelveth's final thought was that he should have read the historical files more carefully. He should have remembered what the humans had promised. Across the galaxy, the Galactic Concord received the alarm 3 hours later. By then, 4 more systems had fallen. The response was confusion, then disbelief, then terror. "This cannot be real," High Counselor Vethener said, reading the reports. The crystal being had led the Concord for 500 years. He had personally voted to abandon humanity. He had called their deaths acceptable. The humans were destroyed. The swarm would have consumed them within a decade. "Apparently not, High Counselor," his aide said, trembling. "The reports indicate that the humans not only survived the swarm, but appeared to have incorporated swarm biotechnology into their ships. Their vessels have organic armor and weapon systems we do not recognize." Vethener stared at the holographic display showing the advancing human fleet. 500,000 ships. The Concord had more, spread across thousands of systems, but gathering them would take months. The humans would burn through 100 worlds before reinforcements could arrive. "Contact their fleet," Vethener ordered. "Open negotiations. Perhaps they can be reasoned with." The transmission was sent. The response came immediately. A recorded message played across every screen in the council chamber. It showed a young human woman standing in the same room where Vethener now sat, 120 years ago. Ambassador Elena Vance. Her voice echoed through the chamber as she begged for help, as she pleaded for just 10,000 ships to save her people. Then the recording showed the vote. 42 abstentions. 4 votes against. 1 lonely vote in favor. Then Elena Vance's final words. "You will remember this day. I promise you that." The recording ended. A new face appeared. An old human male with cold eyes and a uniform covered in medals. Fleet Admiral Kazuki Tanaka. "You left us to die," Tanaka said. "You called us expendable. You sealed our gates and moved on with your lives, certain that you would never see us again." He smiled, and there was no warmth in it. "You were wrong." The transmission cut off. Vethener immediately ordered every available fleet to converge on the human advance. But the Concord's military had grown soft during a century of peace. Their ships were old, their tactics outdated, their crews untested. They had not fought a real war in generations. The humans had been fighting for survival for 40 years. They had been preparing for this moment for 80 more. It was not a battle. It was a lesson. The Concord fleet at Karathi Prime numbered 3,000 ships. The human force that arrived numbered 50,000. The engagement lasted 4 hours. When it ended, not a single Concorde ship remained. The humans did not take prisoners. They did not negotiate surrenders. They simply destroyed everything that resisted and moved on. But they did not kill civilians. They did not bomb cities. They did not commit genocide. Instead, they did something worse. At every world they visited, the humans broadcast footage of the Soul Siege. They showed the council vote. They showed Elena Vance's plea. They showed the sealed gates and the arriving swarm. They showed 40 years of humanity fighting and dying and suffering while the galaxy did nothing. And then they showed what humanity had become. The factories of Mars. The dreadnoughts the size of moons. The soldiers in swarm-derived armor who had been engineered for war since birth. They showed a species that had been abandoned and had transformed itself into something terrible. "We do not want your surrender," the broadcast said. "We want you to watch. We want you to understand. We want you to know that you created this." Systems fell one after another, not through destruction, but through dismantlement. The humans targeted shipyards, military bases, jump gate networks. They crippled the Concorde's ability to wage war while leaving civilian populations untouched. They were not conquerors seeking territory. They were teachers delivering a lesson. Some species tried to fight. They were crushed. Some species tried to flee. Human ships followed them. Some species tried to surrender. "We do not accept surrender," the human commanders replied. "We accept understanding. Tell us why we are here. Tell us what you did. Then we will talk." Within 6 months, the Terran Armada had pushed deep into Concorde space. Dozens of species had been forced to acknowledge the crime their government had committed. Many had turned against the Council, demanding to know why they had abandoned an entire civilization. The Concorde was falling apart, and every fragment blamed the Council for bringing this judgment upon them. Fleet. Admiral Tanaka watched the reports from his flagship. The war was proceeding exactly as planned. Not too fast, not too slow. Every victory was accompanied by education. Every defeat suffered by the Concorde was tied to their original sin. Admiral, his communications officer, reported, "We have reached the final waypoint. The Concorde capital of Ethoria is within range." Tanaka nodded slowly. Ethoria, the seat of the High Council. The room where Elena Vance had been told her people were expendable. "How many ships have gathered for its defense?" he asked. "Approximately 50,000, sir. The largest fleet the Concorde has assembled in centuries." Tanaka smiled. "Move the entire Armada into position. Every ship. I want 2 million warships surrounding that planet before we make contact." His officers rushed to obey. The endgame had begun. The sky above Ethoria turned black with ships. 2 million human warships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, surrounding the Concorde capital world like a shell of steel and fury. The planet's defense fleet, 50,000 vessels that had seemed so impressive hours ago, now looked like toys scattered before giants. The citizens of Ethoria looked up and saw their sun disappear behind an armada that stretched from horizon to horizon. Many fell to their knees. Some screamed. Others simply stared in silence, finally understanding what their government had created all those years. High, Counselor Vethana stood in the council chamber, watching the tactical display with growing despair. 47 species had sent representatives to witness this moment. Many of them were already calculating how to survive the coming storm. Some were preparing to blame the Council for everything. All of them were afraid. "We cannot fight this," General Korath, commander of the defense fleet, said bluntly. "Even if every ship I have rams directly into their formation, we would not destroy 1% of their force. They could burn this world to ash without losing a single vessel. Ben, what do you suggest?" Vethana asked. Pray that they want something other than our destruction. The communication screen activated. Fleet Admiral Kazuki Tanaka's face appeared, ancient and terrible, his eyes holding the weight of 120 years of memory. "High Counselor Vethaner," Tanaka said. "I believe you remember what happened the last time a human stood in that chamber, asking for help. This time, I am not asking for anything. I am telling you what will happen next." Vethaner's crystalline form trembled. "Admiral Tanaka, perhaps we can discuss terms. The Concord is prepared to offer significant reparations, territory, resources. I am not interested in your resources." Tanaka interrupted. "I am coming down to your chamber. You will dismiss your guards and wait for me. If anything happens to me or my escort, my fleet will reduce Ethoria to rubble. Do you understand?" Vethaner understood. He had no choice but to agree. 1 hour later, the doors of the council chamber opened. Fleet Admiral Kazuki Tanaka walked in slowly, his boots echoing on the ancient floor. Behind him marched 12 soldiers of the Terran Honor Guard, wearing powered armor that incorporated living swarm tissue. They looked like nightmares given human form. Tanaka stopped in the exact center of the room, the same spot where Elena Vance had stood and begged for her people's lives. He looked around at the 47 delegations watching from their floating platforms, and he smiled. 120 years ago, he began, a woman named Elena Vance stood where I am standing now. She asked you for help. She asked you for 10,000 ships out of your 14 million. She asked you to save 8 billion lives. He paused. You said no. You called humanity expendable. You sealed our gates and left us to die. Several delegates looked away, unable to meet his eyes. Ambassador Vance died 3 years later, fighting to protect refugee convoys from the swarm. Her last words were a promise that humanity would not forget. Tanaka reached into his uniform and pulled out a small metal badge. Elena Vance's diplomatic identification. I have carried this with me for over a century. It reminds me every day why I am here. High Counselor Vethaner stepped forward. Admiral, please understand. The decision was not made lightly. We faced an impossible choice. The swarm was unstoppable. Sending ships to Seoul would only have delayed the inevitable while weakening our own defenses. We did what we thought was right for the greater good. Tanaka's voice was ice. 5 billion humans died during the Long Dark. 5 billion men, women and children burned and bled and starved while you debated the greater good. Do not speak to me of difficult choices, Counselor. You made your choice. Now you face the consequences. Silence filled the chamber. Tanaka looked up at the delegations. Many of you have asked what we want. Some have offered surrender. Others have begged for mercy. Let me be clear about what is going to happen. He began walking slowly around the chamber, his voice carrying to every corner. The Galactic Concord is finished. Your alliance dies today. Every species will return to their own territory and stay there. Your combined fleets will be disbanded. Your jump gate network will be placed under Terran control. Murmurs of shock and anger rippled through the delegations. You will not be destroyed, Tanaka continued. Humanity is not interested in genocide. We did not survive 40 years of horror to become monsters ourselves. But you will be watched. And if any species, anywhere in this galaxy, ever abandons another to extinction, ever decides that innocent lives are expendable, ever makes the choice you made 120 years ago. He stopped and looked directly at Vethna. We will return. And next time, we will not be so merciful. Delegate Moradi, the shadow being who had told Elena Vance that her people's deaths were simply bad fortune, spoke up. And what gives humanity the right to dictate terms to the entire galaxy? You are one species. We are 47. Tanaka turned to face her. What gives us the right? Look outside, delegate. Look at the sky. 2 million warships. Built by 3 billion survivors who spent 40 years fighting for their lives while you did nothing. That is what gives us the right. He pulled out a data chip and placed it on the central podium. This contains the new laws of the galaxy. Read them, follow them, and remember why they exist. He began walking toward the door, then stopped. One more thing. I want a memorial built in this chamber. A wall with 5 billion names on it. Every human who died because of your decision. Every child who never saw adulthood. Every family that was torn apart. You will see those names every time you gather here. You will never be allowed to forget. Tanaka walked out of the chamber. His soldiers followed. The doors closed behind them with the sound of an era ending. 3 months later, Fleet Admiral Kazuki Tanaka stood on Earth, in a garden that had been planted over one of the great battlefields of the Long Dark. Flowers grew where millions had died. Children played where soldiers had fought and fallen. The world was healing, slowly. Beside him stood a young officer who had been born after the war ended, who had never known the darkness that her ancestors had survived. "Admiral," she asked, "do you think it was worth it? Everything we did?" Tanaka was quiet for a long moment. He thought about Elena Vance and her promise. He thought about Admiral Chen Wei and his final order. He thought about the 5 billion names that now covered a wall in the Concord Council chamber. "I do not know if it was worth it," he said finally. "I only know it was necessary. The galaxy needed to learn that no species is expendable. That abandoning the weak is a crime that will be punished. That humanity does not forget." He looked up at the sky, where Terran warships patrolled in endless formation, guardians of a peace built on the memory of war. "We are not conquerors," he said. "We are not rulers. We are a reminder. And as long as the galaxy remembers what happens when innocent lives are called expendable, our mission is complete." The young officer nodded slowly. "And if they forget?" Tanaka smiled, and for the first time in over a century, there was warmth in it. "Then we remind them again." Above Earth, the Armada held its position, not as a threat, but as a promise. Humanity had been abandoned by the stars, and instead of dying, they had risen. They had become something the universe had never seen before. Something born from betrayal and forged in darkness. Something that would stand watch over the galaxy forever. The stars had tried to forget humanity. They never would again.